StrayAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that's called work on your game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is how to know when to stop. Before we get into this, I remind you all of two things. First of all, my daily motivation and Monday motivation messages guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day or your week, respectively. All you got to do to be getting these to be a part of my text community, it is free to join. So just text me at my number, 305-384-6894. And once we start sending those messages out again, you'll be getting those straight to your phone. No questions asked. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. You would like to have me as your direct coach. You like to be able to ask me questions, tell me your challenges. You like to have me give you better quality questions to replace the questions that you are asking. It's not that your questions aren't good, but there are better ones that would actually help solve your problem, as opposed to maybe moving you marginally forward, but moving you exponentially forward. And you want to start moving through multiplication instead of just addition. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can see everything that our program is about, everything that you get immediate access to, and you become a member of the university and be on the inside instead of the outside of the circle at workonyourgameuniversity.com. With that out the way, let's get into the topic here today, which is how to know when to stop. Now, as the saying goes, all good things come to an end. Everybody's heard that before, right? Well, at some point in life, we all will, at some point, move on from whatever things we're doing right now. All right, is anybody doing anything right now that you think will never end? Well, that's impossible. Everything ends. Even life ends. So anything you're doing in life eventually has to come to an end. So it's impossible for anything to go on forever. So knowing that everything must come to an end, even if death is the only thing that interrupts us, it still will end. So in today's masterclass, I'm going to talk about when it's time to stop doing things and how to make this decision on a voluntary level instead of when maybe some things end on an involuntary level. Some things will end involuntarily. Maybe you just want to keep them going because they're going great for you. But there are some things that you may want to end just when you feel like it's time to end. It's time for you to stop those things from happening. That's what we're going to talk about here today. How to know when to stop, how to know when to walk away, how to know when to say, okay, enough is enough in this particular situation. Exiting a business, leaving a leadership position, something similar in their relationship, even if you want to, where you actually have a choice and a say in the matter, as opposed to death, which for the most part, unless you're committing suicide, you don't have a say in. Point number one. Today's topic, once again, is how to know when to stop. Number one, as a general rule, it's better to leave too early than to leave too late. As a general rule, it is better to leave a situation too early where you could have went a little bit longer than it is to leave too late when you kind of kept going and kind of dragging everything along just because you felt like dragging things along. For example, I was just talking to someone about this today. Michael Jordan, when he retired the second time from the Chicago Bulls after they won their sixth championship in 1998, Michael Jordan still had plenty of gas in the tank. He was still probably the best player in the NBA at that time, but he retired because he didn't want to play for another coach. He didn't want to go to another team he didn't want to play for anyone other than Phil Jackson. Didn't want to play for anyone other than the Bulls. So he retired when he still had gas in the tank. And you know that if you saw his Last Dance documentary or read any articles about Michael, you know that he felt a little bit bitter about the fact that he had retired at that point and felt like he had kind of been forced to retire because he still felt like he had some gas in the tank. But it was actually a beautiful ending because he was still at the top of his game. Now, juxtapose that with someone like Kobe Bryant, who played his last, I believe, his last 2 seasons and change because he had gotten injured and hurt as he tore his Achilles, was a very devastating injury to an athlete who's playing a fast twitch sport like basketball. And Kobe was never the same after he injured his Achilles. And he came back and then he got another injury. I believe it was a knee injury. So he only played a handful of games in the season after he missed a whole season for the injured Achilles. Then he played 2 more full seasons after that. And Kobe was a bad basketball player during those 2 seasons. Now, whenever I say that, Kobe Bryant fans get really upset that I said he was a bad basketball player. But if you go on basketballreference.com and look up Kobe Bryant's stats for his last 2 seasons in the NBA, he was a bad player. He wasn't making any shots, but he kept shooting. And he was not very good, but he still had the mentality of someone who was very good, but he wasn't able to produce on that mentality. Kobe just couldn't physically do it anymore. And he was not a good player his last 2 seasons in the NBA. And You can fight me on that if you want, but there's nothing to fight on. He was not good. Point is, he stayed a little bit too late. Now, for him, it probably wasn't too late. And for Lakers fans and Kobe enthusiasts, it probably wasn't too late. Y'all probably would have just let him play as long as he wanted to because Kobe is Kobe. I get it. But if the goal was winning and success, then he stayed too long. He was not good. The Lakers were not good. And the point being, it's more graceful when you leave too early than when you leave too late. Now, I'm using basketball as an example. There's not a perfect example because in sports, I mean, you're getting paid to play. So Kobe Bryant famously signed a contract extension for a lot of money his last 2 seasons in the NBA when he wasn't even good anymore. And the Lakers paid it to him because it was kind of like they owed it to him because he's maybe the most famous Laker player of all time. And they gave him the money, and they weren't able to sign other good players. And because of Kobe's presence on the roster, other good players probably didn't want to play on that team anyway. So it was kind of a bad move for the Lakers, but a good move for Kobe. So it's a little bit different, but let's just say we're talking about something else. All right, you go to a party, for example. You go to a cocktail party, and you're the life of the party. Everybody's eating out of your hand. You're holding court in the middle of the party. It's better that you leave that party too early when everybody is still enjoying your presence than if you stay too long and people are like, all right, when the hell is he going to leave? Because he's just hanging around and he keeps talking. It's better you leave early. All right, everybody get what I'm saying? All right, better leave the party early than stay at the party too late. It is said that admiration, folks, dies more from indigestion than it dies of starvation. Admiration dies more from indigestion than it dies of starvation. In other words, it's better to leave people wanting more of you than having people say, I had too much of you. It's better to eat not enough food than to eat too much food. Can anybody give me an amen? All right, there's an art to this, folks, because at the same time that I said what I just said, you don't want to leave too early before people have decided that they need you. All right, so you want to make sure you give people enough that they realize how good you are, then leave when they're getting to the point like, damn, this person's really good. They should stay around. That's when you leave. So there's an art to this. It's not like at this exact moment, that's when you leave. If you leave too early before people have really decided that they like you or need you, then they'll forget about you. But if you leave at the right time, then they'll remember you and want you. And then when you come back, you are welcome instead of they're like, oh, here you go again. In one of my favorite books, 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, he talks about this. He talks about mastering the art of timing. And he also says it's better that somebody says to you, where have you, when you show up, they say, man, where have you been? Rather than why have you come again? You get it? You rather somebody say, I haven't seen you or heard from you in a while, but I'm excited that you're here, rather than somebody say, are you here all the time? Please, I wish you would not be here so I can get some space away from you. All right? You rather be on the other end of the spectrum. Okay. So again, as I said, there's an art to this. There's no, at this exact moment, this is what you do. So your skill here is you must have the ability to read the room. Reading the room. That means looking at and seeing the situation around you and knowing what's happening and just figuring and having a fingertip feel of the energy in a space to know when you've been around just long enough, not long enough, or too long. I talked about this in episode 2512. And you must learn to walk away before you overstay your welcome. As a generality, most people make the mistake of staying too long. All right. Most people don't make the mistake of leaving too early. Most people stay too long. And since nobody is perfect, I would suggest that you make the mistake of leaving too early if you're going to make a mistake. In sports, for example, using myself as an example, not Michael or Kobe, I left earlier than I needed to. All right. There was nothing wrong with me physically when I stopped playing basketball. I could have continued to play basketball. And while there is, of course, in every player, a natural deterioration in the body of an athlete along the timeline of playing in the sport, I wasn't at the point where I looked old and I did not feel old on the basketball court. In other words, I left some gas in the tank when it came to playing basketball. But I have no problem with that because what I'm going to tell you in points number 2 and number 3. Another thing that I tell people who work out, for example, I've had some members of Work on Your Game University who ask me about their workouts, and I tell them you are better off leaving some repetitions. When you do workouts, you should leave repetitions in the tank. Any of you who works out on a regular basis, you should be leaving reps in the tank. Unless you are training to play a professional sport, you should be leaving reps in the tank in your workouts. What does that mean? That means you should not be maxing out, meaning lifting or running or doing as many or as much as you can. You should not be doing that every workout rather. You should not be doing that every workout. Every workout, you should feel as if when you get done, you should feel as if you could do more reps. You could do more sets. You could lift more weights. You can do more. You should feel like you could do more, but don't do more. That's the point. You want to leave some gas in the tank. And the reason I tell people that for workouts, because you don't want to be killing yourself every workout. You want to give your body enough time or space to recover. Point number 2, Today's topic, once again, is how to know when to stop. Number 2, when the future will be better after you, and you are sure of it. When the future will be better after you, that's when you walk away. So when I say the future, this can refer to the future of an organization that you are stepping away from, such as stepping down as CEO from a company. When you know that the people you have behind you are really good and they're ready and they're seasoned and they have all the training that they need, then it's time for you to step aside and let them step up. That's when you can walk away. For example, when I was watching a documentary it was called American Playboy. It's about Hugh Hefner. You can find it on Amazon Prime Video. Hugh Hefner put his daughter in charge of the company at the point that he finally decided it was time for him to step away and not run the business anymore. He put his daughter in charge as the CEO to run the day-to-day operations of the business because he realized, and this is Hugh in his own words, he said, I realized that my daughter was ready. She had been seasoned. She loved the brand. She loved the business. And she was damn good at what she did. I didn't need to be here. It didn't need me anymore. The only reason I was still running the business was basically serving my own ego. I got out the way to let my daughter run the company, and it was a great move. So when you can see that whoever is coming in behind you is ready, you have to have the humility to get the hell out the way. Not simple as that. And also thinking about your personal future as you may be moving on to something bigger and better for yourself outside of the thing that you are doing. So as I ended on point number 1, talking about my walking away from playing basketball, one of the reasons I was willing to do it because I saw a big opportunity for myself in the business and entrepreneurial space that I wanted to take advantage of right there in the moment, rather than stringing out a few more years as an athlete. Because I continued to prioritize basketball rather than going into the business world, then I may have lost that business opportunity that was on my hands at that time. And also, another thing that was happening was in dating. I was in my early 30s at that point, and every girl that I met, and I told them what I did for a living with the basketball and how it worked and where I went and how long I'd be gone and didn't know when I was coming back. Well, I could see it in many of their faces and hear it in their voices. Well, okay, how am I supposed to do anything with this guy when he might leave in 3 months and he's going to be gone for a year, and I don't know if or when he's coming back. I'm not too sure about that. So at the same time, I had that on my mind as well, which meant I had other better things to move on to in walking away from basketball. I wasn't walking into an empty space when I walked away from the game. But again, that's just me. You need to look at your situation and ask yourself, is there something else you're walking into that can make it okay for you to walk away from the thing you're walking away from? But again, this requires you getting an assessment of where you're at. So I was stepping away into something that I saw as a bigger and better thing than what I was currently doing. And I was completely okay with that. Which is why I was able to walk away cold turkey and never even seriously at any point thought about, hey, let me come back and play basketball again or try to play professional. I never thought about it again. And it's been almost 10 years because I knew I was done. I did everything I needed to do. So if you're running a family-owned business, for example, you will know when your son or your daughter is ready to take over the company from you, as I just gave you with Hugh Hefner example, and you can calmly ride off into the sunset knowing that things are in good hands. This is something that maybe we could have seen with our, at least as of this recording, is a tenuous situation, our current president, Joe Biden. All right, maybe he could have seen, okay, let me just do this 4-year term. I've been a career politician for 50 years. Let me do this 4-year term, and I got this young vice president, or at least young relative to him, vice president. Let me just pass the reins over to her, and she could be president for 4 years without even having to win an election. Or, well, I guess she would have to win an election, but she could be president or at least act as president when I step down, and everybody knows I'm stepping down, so she can step in and maybe be the incumbent to run for president against whoever's going to come up against her, instead of it having to be the way that it did. It was kind of sloppy the way it happened, and they're trying to whitewash it and make it seem like it was all his choice. But we all know, any of you who follows that stuff knows it wasn't really his choice. It was forced upon him, and then they prettied it up to make it seem like he chose to do it. He didn't choose to do it. But anyway, the problem with what Joe Biden did is he stayed too long. That was his problem. He stayed too long until his body couldn't do it anymore, his brain couldn't do it anymore, and then they had to force him out. So you don't want to be that. All right, you don't want to be that person. Okay, you often see in sports, for example, with an aging superstar who keeps holding on when there's a young star waiting for their opportunity, but the young star can't get their chance because the old star won't get the hell out the way. In football, if you remember, the Green Bay Packers had a legendary quarterback by the name of Brett Favre, and Brett Favre kept playing, and they drafted a young quarterback named Aaron Rodgers, who was brought in to be like the understudy to Favre, and he was going to get his chance as soon as Brett Favre got the hell out of the way. But Brett Favre kept playing, and Brett Favre wasn't ready to retire, and it's not Brett Favre's fault. It's not like he has to retire just because you drafted a quarterback. It's not his business. But because they were ready to move on, Brett Favre ended up leaving the Packers and going playing for another team. I think he played for two other teams before he retired. And finally, Aaron Rodgers got a shot. Aaron Rodgers was pretty damn good. But again, it's not Brett Favre's fault. That was the team's fault. They just had bad timing in terms of how long was Brett going to hold on. Same thing happened in New England with Tom Brady. The Patriots wanted to move on to their next phase. They drafted other quarterbacks, but Tom Brady kept playing. Tom Brady played until he was 45 years old, which is unheard of in football. And they had these young quarterbacks coming behind him who maybe they thought they would be stars, but we can't find out because the guys ain't playing. And Tom Brady kept playing. Eventually, Tom Brady, same thing. He left the Patriots and went and played for another team because that team was ready to move on, but he wasn't ready to move on. This happens in sports a lot. We have an aging star. The team is ready to move on to a new era, but the aging star is still good enough that they feel like they want to keep playing, so they end up playing for other teams. It's happened in basketball. Hakeem Olajuwon with the New York Knicks, Patrick Ewing. Players go and play for other teams for their last couple years because the team they were with doesn't want to keep them around as they age and they're not as good as they used to be. So one thing I always told myself in sports is that I wanted to walk away from the game instead of being carried out of the game. I didn't want to be carried out of the game. Now, there are some athletes who have the exact opposite mentality. They are the kind of people who say, I'm going to keep playing until I can't play anymore. They're going to have to carry me off the court or off the field because I'm going to keep playing until I can't move. And there are others like me who say, no, I'm going to walk away while I can still walk away. I never wanted to be the old guy on the basketball court. There's also a reason why people often ask me, Dre, do you ever play like pickup basketball? I was in Whole Foods last week, as a matter of fact, and I walked past a couple of the employees who were just idling. And one of the guys said, man, I used to watch the training videos back in the day. And then he said, do you still hoop? And I said, no, hoop means play basketball, by the way, H-O-O-P, hoop. And I said, no, I don't hoop anymore. I don't play anymore. And one of the reasons I don't play anymore is because I never wanted to be the old guy on the court. In other words, I don't want to, in my mind, be looking at some 19-year-old kid who, let's say, works at Whole Foods, who's beating me in basketball at the LA Fitness. And the only reason he's beating me is because I'm old and can't move like I used to, and he's young, not because he's actually good. Now, this kid might not have any talent at all, and I know when I was 19, I would have kicked his ass, but I'm not 19, and he's beating me simply because I'm the old guy compared to him. I never wanted to be the old guy on the court. That's why I walked off the court when I was still relatively young and good. I didn't want to be the guy getting beat wearing a knee brace and all of that. I remember I saw that too often with other guys who kept playing way past when their bodies could really do anything, and they're getting beat by people who don't have half their skill but have the youth. So they're able to beat them. Sports is a game of youth. So you got to know when to walk away, especially in sports, because the clock is watching you. Point number 3, today's topic, once again, is how to know when to stop. Number 3, when all of your goals have been accomplished. This is an important one. I mentioned the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. One of his chapters in that book is planning all the way to the end. Planning all the way to the end. What is the end? What did we just talk about in yesterday's episode? The end game. Planning to the end game. You see, you can't plan to the end, folks, if you don't know what the end is. What is the end? What needs to be achieved? What needs to be accomplished? What needs to be measured? How much do you need to accumulate? What is the amount where you can say this is done, completed, finished? In business, many people don't talk about this, but it should be spoken about in business. Actually, it's not even in business. Let's just say in life, when we talk about finances and money, what is your number? You need to have a number that you know, once I have this much, whether it's in cash, in assets, in whatever, net worth, etc., whatever number, whatever, however you're going to count it, what is the enough amount that once I have this, I'm good? Because at that point, now you know you can retire. Or so if I get this, I can retire, and I know I can live this long on this type of lifestyle. When I get this, I know I'm good because I can give this much to charity. I'll give this much to my kids if you have any, if you want to do that, or I can live off this much. What is your enough number to where you know you can stop? If you don't know, then you may literally find yourself working yourself to death. Find yourself literally working yourself to death because you'll keep working because you don't know when to stop. That's what planning all the way to the end means. And guess what? It's one of the chapters in a book called The 48 Laws of Power. Okay, folks, if you want to be powerful, you must plan to the end of your activities. Do not start doing things as a means to an end, but never think about what the end actually is. And most of us who are working, most of you who are listening to this, do some type of work on a daily basis, whether it's at home with your kids or at an office or in your business. Have you thought about what the end of the work is? You started your work as a means. We don't work just to work. We work because we're looking to achieve something and do something. So what are you looking to achieve? What are you looking to do? And how do you know when you should stop? Do you know? Have you thought about it? Have you laid out some measurables for, okay, once I've done this, this, and this, then I can stop. Or once I have these in place, maybe you can put things in place. Let's say, for example, in my business, one of the things that I set up is that I will have systems and processes that can still make me money even when I'm not actively doing things like recording this show or directly coaching people or writing every day. Maybe I'll still write because I enjoy the process of writing, but other pieces of it that may be actual work, like stepping on stages and doing speeches or coaching people on calls, maybe I can get rid of that stuff and maybe still do a few things that I like. But the point is, can I put systems and processes in place? Once I have these in place and I know it's going to produce this much every month, every week, every year, etc. Okay, now I can walk away because I know I have that coming in and I'm good if I don't do any other business. Have you thought about that? I'm just asking, have you thought about it? And this is what planning all the way to the end is about. For you to know the end, you need a plan for what needs to be accomplished that will constitute the end. Again, we just talked about this in yesterday's episode. What are the goals that you must reach? What are the measurements you must be hitting? How would you know the job is done? This is another one of the great things about sports, because sports are designed such that the end is built into the structure of the game. So you don't have to think about the end because the end is already made for you. In football, there are 4 quarters, right? So at the end of the 4th quarter, as long as one team has the lead, the game's over. All right, there's nothing else. Basketball, same thing. Every sport, there's an end game. In other sports, you play to a certain amount of points, right? A certain amount of points or sets won, then the game is over. But the end is already built in. Whereas in business, especially those of you who are entrepreneurs, there's no end built in. There's no one telling you, okay, the game's over now. You got to stop working. All right, nobody tells you that. And this is how people end up working themselves to death because they don't think about it themselves because they're used to being in organizations and structures where that's made for you, but it's not made for you in the business world. So the challenge with business, again, with no structure in place, you have to do all of this. This is the work. This is the reason why I have our university, Work on Your Game University, to help people like you put this structure in place in case you don't already have it. Most people do not have it. So I work with you to put this structure in place so you know when to stop. And when to stop is not just about your whole life. It could be, when do we stop today? When do we stop at the end of the week? When do we stop this month? How do we know what we need to achieve? What is the end goal? All right. You got to decide when the game's over, what needs to be achieved, if anything, for you to stop playing in every aspect of your life. That's it. Let's recap today's class, which is how to know when to stop. As the saying goes, all good things come to an end, like life comes to an end. But also what we're talking about here today are the places where you can voluntarily choose when to stop. And you need to know what they are. Point number 1, better to leave too early than to leave too late. Remember, most admiration dies from indigestion, which means too much of it, than starvation, which means not enough of it. You are better off risking starving someone or yourself than you are risking indigestion. And when it comes to food, same thing. You're better off not eating enough than eating too much. Point number 2, when the future will be better after you. And the future can mean the future of your organization, the future of the people you are serving, or your personal future, because you're stepping into something that is maybe a newer path or a bigger and better thing for you that you are ready to move on to because of the thing that you're ready to move on from. So you have to have a fingertip feel for this. There's an art to this. There's no direct science. There's not a measurement like when you do this and this, then that means it's time to move on. It is very subjective and depends on the situation on a case-by-case basis. But you have to develop the feel for knowing when is it time for me to walk away, especially when you're in a leadership position, because there may not be too many people who have your ear and have the authority to tell you to walk away. You had to decide on your own. Point number 3, when all your goals have been accomplished, what are the goals? What's the end game? Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power. Plan all the way to the end. Have you planned to the end? What is the end for you? How do you know is the end? What measurables do you need to hit that you know is the end and you know it makes sense and you know it's time to walk away? You should think about this and even go further than thinking about it. Start planning it. The better you have this plan, the easier it will be for you to walk away. In sports, the end is already set for you. At the end of the 4th quarter, the game's over. All right. But in business, it is not set for you. In life, all of you, whether you have a business or not, it is not set for you. How do you know when to retire? All right, nobody's going to make you do it. I look at coaches in sports. A lot of them don't know when to retire. They just keep trying and keep going because they don't know when to stop. So you got to figure out when you're going to stop. All that said, text me. So you're my community. My number's down below in the description. Work on Your Game University. All right, but you would like some direct help with actually putting this stuff together in a systematic and strategic process with my direct help in planning all these things out, exactly where you're going, when, where, why, and how. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. Work on your game. Dre, all